Welcome to Intelligence Real and Imagined from the Work AI Institute at Glean. This is the show where we sort through what's real, what's hype, and what actually works with AI at work. In this episode, we're digging into how AI is starting to put real pressure on organizational design, how teams are restructuring around AI, how decision-making and ownership shift when work gets faster, and what new business models might replace the old SaaS playbook. Our guest today is Cham, founding partner of Bloomberg Beta, Bloomberg's venture fund. He's spent his career backing and studying how new technologies reshape teams, products, and business models. And he has a front row seat to how AI is changing what gets built, who builds it, and how work gets organized. As always, I'm also joined by my co-host Bob Sutton, Professor Emeritus at Stanford and one of the founding members of the Work AI Institute. I'm really excited for this conversation, so let's go ahead and dive in.
The question of what an organization is supposed to look like, I don't think I've ever been confused about it, but I think I'm confused.
I am and by the way, of course, this is only happening at the tail, right? They're only like, I spend all day looking for these kinds of teams, and I found 3 of them.
Okay.
Right? Like I literally spent all day. Like I'm like, have you heard of someone doing this? Right? And then like you only see a few. So this is not like normal practice yet.
Interesting.
So.
Does that team activity factor more into your decision making to invest now than it did before?
There's almost a way in which I don't really care what you're doing. I kind of care if you figured out like the future, right? Then I'll work with you we'll figure out some business, right? But if you figure out how to like that aggressive way of working, like that's what I spend all my time looking for.
Okay, all right. Well, you really are looking for outliers.
And as we think about enterprise AI in particular, if you're to envision, say, 1 year, 2 year, what's the best possible outcome of AI impacting our organizations?
So now I'm seeing this only in a few small places right now, but I do feel like there are small teams right now that have genuinely figured out how to use the LLMs for what they're best at. And I think like that's not widespread yet, right? That even now I spent all day looking for this, right? I spent all day looking for people who are using LLMs in a genuinely aggressive way where they've pulled people out of the process as much as possible, and they've figured out how to use the LLMs in ways that the LLMs are good at, because they're bad at lots of things. They do, all the normal things that people complain about. Those are totally true. But at the same time, they are getting cheaper. They are getting more effective along certain dimensions. And then the people who see the future and are able to adapt the way that they work to what the LLMs are good at, right? I feel like that's going to be very disconcerting and very, very, very weird. And
so these are, I assume, small teams have done this from birth.
Yes. Or there's a company that I invested in where the team, the CTO, co-founder has 100 engineers. He said, we can't actually, and he tried to implement it, and he did the same thing everyone else did. You get these marginal improvements. So then he literally pulled 4 people out of the organization.
Okay.
He stuck them in a different co-working space. They have a cave. They have like manifestos. And it's almost like they've got to like buy into a religion, a fundamentally different way of working in order to see any of the results. And I think like the way that they're working will be widespread, 1 to 20 years from now, right?
So that's the classic way that a radical innovation starts in an existing organization, is you pull them off.
That's right.
And pretend they're a brand new organization.
That's right. And then like, this guy, Justin McCarthy, to his credit, like he's like, look, you've got to be all in with me on this way of thinking. It may or may not work, but you've got to just be all in and jump in. And so, and be honest, like he's like I feel like him, there's a couple small teams in Anthropic, there are a couple small teams at Microsoft where they've genuinely adopted that view, and then suddenly they're managing these workflows, and it's as if they're managing 8, 10, 50 employees, and it's exhausting because it's not like managing the way a normal manager manages, where they say occasionally I do a one-on-one, right? But instead, these things are constantly coming back to them and saying, hey, this works now, or would you like to give me feedback on this, right? And so that shift, I feel like we're just tasting the beginning of, and I've not seen anyone scale it past 5 to 8 people.
Okay, so the word workflows in that situation, it's taken me a while as a regular organizational theorist, because I think of a human managing other humans, but you're literally managing a bunch of AI bots, and that's it. There's no humans.
And then the humans who work with you on the side, you guys collaborate, but then the way you collaborate is unclear. And by the way, I've only seen this work in software development too, right? So I've not seen this everywhere else, but it feels like, I mean, there's a way in which like software, the way a friend of mine puts it is like code goes first, right? Like software development is clear enough, it has enough like nice properties that if you can figure it out for software development, then you can take those lessons and apply them everywhere else.
Well, so I mean, the inversion of that is when Uber drivers are managed by an algorithm, basically.
Sure.
And then I guess when we have Waymo, it's an algorithm, overseeing robots, literally.
Right. So what's interesting about it, though, like if you think about the Uber case as it was designed 10 years ago versus Uber case as it is now, I bet you that a modern Uber manager would do a better job than I would, right? Because a modern LLM Uber manager might actually be like, oh, this person's kind of tired. I will write a note and say something. Because like I think one of the durable truths about the models right now is that they have higher EQ than at least a 75th percentile guy. Now, men are admittedly quite clueless compared to like the overall population, but like definitely it's one of those cases where, sort of its ability to read into situations and capture nuances is actually quite good and sort of surprising.
So one of the people that we've interviewed and known for a long time, Lindsay Cameron, she's a Wharton professor, and for her dissertation, one of the things she did was she was an Uber driver, and she studies basically having an algorithm for a boss, and essentially Uber drivers often like having the algorithm because, to your point, it's more reliable, it's more fair, and the other thing is that there's ways to game all bosses. And the ways to game the algorithm are really consistent. Like it doesn't vary because you always have the same algorithm. It's like you always have the same boss. So there are advantages.
Yeah. I mean, I could totally see that, right?
And when you talk, James, about another religion, as people are buying into this new way of working, is it reflexive use of AI? Is there something beyond that they're buying into?
Okay, so now in the case of this. So one of the teams, I think, thought pretty hard about like trying to codify what they do. And they had a couple of ideas, especially around not handwriting any code and not reading any code. And so that idea for software developer is super distasteful. It seems ridiculous, right? My whole life, I'm a better software developer because I actually could look at this thing and understand it faster than a normal person or understand some hidden structure quicker. And then the idea that you would take that out of your core process was just very hard, right? And like they said, look, we're going to go all in on this, right? We're also going to go all in on like a lot of scaffolding around testing. And then we're going to go all in on like looking for workflows or loops where a person might manage and design it, but is not a blocker at any one of the steps.
Okay.
And the moment you pull that off, right, then suddenly the thing goes much faster because there's a way in which, I don't know, there's like a dumb, I should call it dumb, but there's a way that people talk about ROI right now that seems like the same thing I would have done if I were measuring IT projects in 2005.
Okay.
And that seems obviously wrong, in part because right now we're on the edge of discovering and figuring out things. And so you're looking for these like higher payoff experiments so that you can then describe to everyone else, oh, this thing works well. You should all work this way. And that's like a different thing than, oh, we'll save 20 cents and we replace the call center in this way or that way.
So this is why it has to either be done in a skunkworks or it has to be done in a
startup,
LLM startup. And so that's sort of. Do you have any more to add about this? Because it's such a weird outlier. Either it's the future or it's going to flame. Right?
That's right. No, exactly. I say this to these guys all the time. This could be totally wrong, or this could be clearly the future. And sort of the The other things that they do is like the nature of their collaboration between people is different because it turns out when they are working so fast with the LLMs, there's almost a way in which like the normal way of, the two of us are looking over some code repo or we're talking no longer makes sense because of this piece, your little loop with the agents is so fast that you don't really figure out how to work with them. So the other thing that they do a lot of is they do a lot of having the agents learn lessons. Right, they do a lot of send the LLM off to look at some other open source code base or read some documents and then come back and say, here are the lessons that are interesting for the organization or for the way that we run, and here's some things that we might actually even incorporate into our workflows. And I think that changes the nature of dependencies, right? And then so suddenly that's why I want to talk to the two of you, because like I feel like the moment that happens, then like the old normal assumptions around organizations change, right? And I don't really know what it means, but it feels like if it works, it means something profound.
Let's talk about software as a service.
Yes.
Dominated the last 20 years in terms of software and investment. As we think about AI, what do you think the dominant model is going to be?
I think it's a really open question. I think it's important to remember that software as a service is not just a valuable relationship between a company and its customers, but also in some ways, software as a service was a terrific financing hack that actually a bunch of very smart VCs realized that the risk of a company going from $1 to $10 to $50 million is less than what the world thought. That actually a company might look like it's losing money, but actually because they'd established a whole set of patterns with their set of customers, that actually it was much less risk. And so, my old boss, David Cowan, I think was the first one to articulate that to me. And I think in general, the first one to really get that software as a service is not just a commercial thing, but also is a different way of underwriting a business model. And then I think that old pattern, maybe near its end, right? That there's a way in which, in part because customers get more demanding, but also my ability to copy, or I don't want to say copy, but my ability to adopt software and create software on my own might change. That suddenly we're in a very different, uncomfortable world for software companies, right? And so that question, I'll tell you what people want, right? The dream always is that you figure out some way to align yourself with the incentives of your customer, right? And then you figure out some way to say, I will share in some outcome. It's still really hard, right? It's still really, really hard. And it's unclear to me whether it's even going to be doable in a consistent way. Because, of course, I'm like, I made you $50 million. You're like, well, you didn't really make me $50 million. You made me $30 million. And consider the work I did on that, that whole negotiation feels really hard. And so the fear is that we end up with something that looks more like utility computing, right? And the problem with utility is so good, but the problem with it is where I make money for some amount of work. The problem with it is that our incentives are not aligned, right? That I'm constantly just trying to get you to use my compute more rather than get some real outcome that's helpful for you. And so those are probably the two I think those are the two things people consider. There's a third one, which I think is a different business entirely, in which you say, the software that I've created is so valuable that rather than selling it to other people, I will just run a business based on it. Right.
Yeah.
And so that feels like
that's SAP and Oracle, isn't it?
It feels like that's still out there as an option.
Yeah.
So, but we're not. But I don't know.
And so, as you're advising startups, what do you tell them in terms of how to think about pricing?
I think you always tell them they're not charging enough, because that's almost always true, right? And then there's a little bit of, sort of the world is shifting so much that you're just paying attention to other people in your market as far as what are the norms for a specific market. So that's right now, I think, sort of where we are, because this is a little bit of timing thing, right? Where even if some sort of utility computing thing made the most sense, if you jumped too far ahead of everyone else, then you create these problems, right? And so, it's very market specific right now, at least right now.
What's the worst possible scenario of AI?
There's so many bad things that can happen, right? like sort of, and it's everything from, the worst, it's everything from the mundane. We live in a world of infinite slop And, sort of we end up in a place where, sort of, I'm afraid that you text me and I'm like, is it really Rebecca? Or is it like, I can't really trust this? Sort of we go from a relatively high trust environment to a very low trust environment. And that could be just around the corner, right? And so
I think it's already here, actually.
Yeah. Well, you feel that, right? You feel like that first time where you're like, oh, this is not the person who I thought it was.
Right.
And then that becomes, or like, and it'll be phone calls, it'll be video, like all that. That's sort of, and the moment, of course, that we go from a high trust environment to a low trust environment, then everything slows down. Another terrible version is if we end up, and I don't think this will happen, but if we end up with just one dominant provider of LLMs and then they integrate everything and then they have no incentive to get better, and then suddenly we're all like sort of under the rule of, whatever, like,
right.
And that's a bad outcome, right? And I think like I think that's less likely now, in part just because everyone is thinking about this, right? There's a nice thing where like the terrifying thing as an investor, of course, is like the fact that everyone cares means that like things become quite expensive and your bubble words or whatever, things like that people worry about. But the nice thing is when everyone is focused on a problem, that people will find solutions, right? And then when they find the solutions and tell other people about the solutions, then we all benefit.
So I wonder, just in thinking of your earlier examples and playing out the example where you've got these actually quite smart engineers who they're kind of running fleets of LLMs.
Yeah.
It seems to me that they're at the point where they're actually managing things they can't understand. So do you worry about us getting to the point where we have what used to be a social system, which by the way was too complicated to understand as it was? If you're running Walmart or pick your large company or Facebook Meta, you actually can't understand what you're running. But you were describing another level of incomprehensibility.
Right. Okay, so I think that you don't need everyone to understand.
Right.
But as long as we have both an information ecosystem and an educational ecosystem where we encourage like some percentage of people to actually care about how things actually work, right? Then I feel like we're okay, right? Sort of as long as like...
Well, I'm not just talking about caring. I'm talking about no matter how much you care, that you have this thing that actually is impossible. So you don't understand how it works. You don't understand what it's doing. You don't understand how to fix it.
Right.
That's my paranoid fantasy. Maybe that's too paranoid.
I mean, I think the version of that, look, that happens a lot, right? There's lots of cases where we end up with some system.
It's not the problem.
And then we have to roll back or fix something.
Right.
And then I think the right fear, the variation of what you're talking about that is scary is like, in part because everyone is so excited about this that we take 5 steps too far before we realize, oh, this does not work at all, right? And then have to roll back and then desperately try to roll back. And so I think that's like that'll happen, right?
Yeah, that'll happen.
It's just a question of how bad. Hopefully it won't be that bad.
Yeah. The question is how big is the failure?
Right.
That still happens because we have complex systems that fail. Dams. Pick
That's
whatever
right.
you want.
Oh, totally. And then like and in that way, like there's this term that like some of the AI folks talk about in terms of being an accelerationist, where they're like, oh, they want the thing to go as fast as possible. Right. And I kind of want that to happen, but only because I want the problems to happen earlier,
right,
in local ways. Like we were talking about San Francisco earlier. I think of San Francisco as a staging server for the rest of the world, right? Where we try these things, people see and hopefully people see whether they work or not. Right. And then the problem is sometimes they don't really.
No, they really
they don't know. They can't tell, or they don't pay enough. But you know what I mean. There's like
we were talking about San Francisco. The mean is not very interesting. It's the variance. It's
totally.
The norm.
That's right.
And everything.
That's right. And then, like in theory, a smarter world would say we won't do all the dumb things that people in San Francisco do, or the things that obviously don't work, and we'll do the things that do work, right? But then, sometimes the things that don't work are easier to capture in a tweet. Right, so that's
it's also the general argument thing that bad is stronger than good. People remember it; it spreads more quickly. So,
that's right.
And that's a problem with AI too. Is it's really easy to focus on the dark part and how terrible it's going to be, because just we as human beings just are. Those of us who survived to breed are those of us who focus on the bad stuff and avoid
it. Survived, right? That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so there's this I watched. I have some friends at MBER who would do this conference on AI, in part because I was very interested in the microeconomics of AI. And so then they did one, they do one every year, but they did one 7 years ago, in which Jan LeCun, who's one of these giants, sort of gives some talk. And then they ask, Danny Kahneman. They say, Danny Kahneman, what do you think? And Danny Kahneman, who's honestly, he's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. And he says a few things. And then like this is 7 years ago. And he says these things and they're like brilliant and shocking. And they like are even clearer today. So you should totally dig it up. But one of the things he says, he's like, look, the wisdom, wisdom is about breadth, right? And then so there's a way in which if we design the models well, the models will consider more factors. And then that way, the models will be wiser than we are, right? If only we let them. And then the other thing is he said, which just haunts me, and I think he's right, unfortunately, is that the models will offer more emotional sustenance than we will. That'll just be easier.
Danny was a smart guy.
He was, you're right. I was like, but he said it 7 years ago. I read it. I was like, that's ridiculous. That can't be true. And then now, of course, I think that's just the world we feel like right next to, where, it's just more reliably nice to me, right? And
Danny's last book, actually, with a couple other folks, which really applies to the times too, was on noise.
Oh yeah,
not bias. And I think when I think of AI, Rebecca and I just spent a few months dabbling and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Noise seems to be the headline, which is there's so much variation, there's so much inconsistent beliefs, there's so many successes, there's so many failures, and people tell such varied narratives. It's just like walking into a random scatter of ideas, which is how he defined noise.
Right.
And so even then, I mean, Danny was so smart.
Yeah. It was amazing anyway. So
Danny just was amazing.
So as we think about noise and change, we've talked about a lot of ways that AI is likely to change aspects of our work. What's one aspect of our work or how we work that you don't think will change or shouldn't change?
Okay, for better or worse, they will probably continue to be commercial relationships. Right? That people will probably still get paid for something.
Good.
They will probably still have money as an organizing principle, right? So that'll probably be true. I mean, another version is the LLMs get so good at dealing with lots and lots of variables that we end up with some weird barter system, right? That's possible.
Yeah, that's possible.
Unlikely, but so that will remain true. There's a good question around whether human systems are dynamic and to what extent humans will continue to shift what we find valuable, right? And it's possible that I will value the parasocial relationship more than the social one, right? And so that's possible. So maybe I was going to make an argument that people still value some human things, but that might not be true. Okay, so maybe the only thing I'm sure about is that there'll be commercial relationships, right? That will still continue to have a single number.
There's always going to be money.
That's right.
Or some variation.
That's right.
Cryptocurrency or something.
Right.
What a great conversation. If you thought so too, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks for spending your time with us, and we'll see you next time on Intelligence, Real and Imagined.